It was 11:45 at night when my phone lit up the dark of my rainy Seattle apartment. I picked it up expecting a work emergency. Instead, it was a text from my mother in Scottsdale. No, hello, no asking how I was. Just a demand. We need $5,000 transferred by morning. Jessica's influencer launch party is over budget, and as her sister, it is your duty to support her dreams. I stared at the screen. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a line of credit. The audacity wasn't just insulting, it was clarifying. I didn't type a reply. I didn't call. I just closed the message and opened my banking app. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't hesitate. I logged into my banking app and navigated to the recurring transfers tab. There it was. Family Support Fund. $1,200 a month every month for 3 years. That was $43,200 I had poured into a black hole of designer clothes and fake engagement metrics. I didn't feel guilty. I felt like an auditor correcting a long-standing clerical error. I clicked cancel. A pop-up asked me to confirm. I clicked yes. Then I went to my contacts list. Mother, father, Jessica. I selected them all and hit block. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy and clean like the air after a thunderstorm. I walked to the window of my apartment. Outside, the Seattle rain was hammering against the glass, cold and relentless. It was the complete opposite of where I came from. I grew up in the stifling air-conditioned perfection of Scottsdale, Arizona, where the heat was a physical weight and the lawns were painted green to look alive. That house was a stage, and I was just a prop that had been misplaced. For 26 years, I lived as a ghost in my own hallway. It wasn't that my parents were cruel in the way you see in movies. They didn't lock me in a cupboard or starve me. It was something quieter and infinitely more damaging. I was unperceived. I was a piece of furniture necessary for the scene to look complete but utterly irrelevant to the plot. I remember family dinners where I would sit at the table for an hour listening to my mother agonize over which filter made Jessica's eyes look bluer, and not a single person would look at me. I could have stood up, screamed, and set the table on fire, and they probably would have just asked me to move out of the frame so they could get a better shot of the smoke. I wasn't a daughter. I was background noise, a ghost haunting a house that was obsessed with the technicolor life of my sister. They saw my physical form, but they never saw me. They didn't know I taught myself to code on a refurbished laptop I bought with babysitting money. They didn't know I graduated early. They didn't know I was building an empire in the dark while they were busy polishing their golden child. And the worst part was, for a long time I let them do it. I thought if I just stayed quiet enough, if I just gave enough, eventually they would turn the camera toward me. But tonight, staring at the rain washing away the dust of the city, I realized the truth. I didn't need their camera. I had my own light. And I was done paying for the privilege of being ignored. It wasn't just that they preferred Jessica. That would have been painful but human. It was far colder than that. It was a business decision. My parents, David and Lisa, were social climbers who had stalled halfway up the mountain in Scottsdale. They viewed their children not as people but as assets in their portfolio of public perception. Jessica was their high-risk, high-reward venture. She was beautiful, loud, and malleable, the perfect avatar for their ambitions. They didn't love her. They invested in her. She was a billboard for the life they couldn't quite afford but desperately wanted to project. Every dollar they poured into her, the modeling classes, the lifestyle coaching, the trips to Tulum, was calculated to yield a return in the form of status. She supplied them with narcissistic fuel, a currency more valuable to them than actual solvency. I, on the other hand, was a non-performing asset. I was introverted. I liked code, logic, and quiet. I offered no public glory. In the economy of their ego, I was a sunk cost. I didn't make them look good at the country club, so I was devalued. The financial disparity was staggering. I remember my sophomore year of college. I was eating instant ramen and working the night shift at a data center to pay for my textbooks. That same semester, my mother drained her IRA to buy Jessica 10,000 fake Instagram followers because her engagement metrics were low. They were mortgaging their future to prop up a fantasy while I was building a reality they couldn't be bothered to understand. That is the ultimate irony. They think I'm a mid-level IT support worker because that's the narrative they assigned to me. They never asked about my computer games. If they had, they would know those games were actually UX design frameworks. They would know I wasn't just fixing printers. I was consulting for Fortune 500 tech firms. I am a wealthy woman. I own my apartment in Seattle outright. My investment portfolio is real, unlike the follower count they bought for my sister. But I never told them. Wealth to me is privacy. To them, if it isn't posted, it doesn't exist. They were starving in a house made of gold because they refused to turn on the lights in the hallway where I lived. My silence was met with a digital riot. When calls failed, the emails started flooding in. You are ruining Jessica's future. We raised you better than this. Call us immediately, or we are calling the police. I didn't reply. I simply dragged them into a folder labeled evidence and went back to work. I thought distance would protect me. I thought the 1,000 miles between Seattle and Scottsdale was a fortress. I was wrong. Desperation, it turns out, buys plane tickets. 3 days after I blocked them, the receptionist at my firm called my desk line. Her voice was hushed, professional but uneasy. Samantha, there is a gentleman here. David. He says he's your father and he says it's a medical emergency. My stomach turned over, not with worry, but with a cold, sinking realization. He hadn't come to check on me. He had come to collect. I took the elevator down to the lobby. My office building is a cathedral of glass, steel, and hushed productivity. It smells like ozone and expensive espresso. Standing in the middle of it, dripping wet from the Seattle drizzle, was my father. In Scottsdale, David was a big man. He took up space with his voice, his ego, and his pastel polo shirts. But here, against the backdrop of gray skies and serious tech money, he looked small. He looked like a man trying to sell a timeshare at a funeral home. He was out of his element, and the frantic energy radiating off him was almost visible. When he saw me, he didn't scream, he performed. He rushed forward, arms open, playing the role of the terrified parent, for the benefit of the security guard and the receptionist. Samantha, thank God, he exclaimed loud enough to turn heads. He pulled me into a hug. My arms stayed at my sides. I felt the damp wool of his coat and the frantic beat of his heart. Then he leaned close to my ear, and the performance vanished. His voice dropped to a hiss. You cut us off. After everything we did for you. I pulled back, stepping out of his reach. I didn't look at the receptionist. I looked him dead in the eye. We are not doing this here, I said. My voice was low level. You have 5 minutes. I led him to a seating area in the far corner, away from the elevators. He sat on the edge of the leather chair, vibrating with rage. You think you can just block us, he spat, keeping his voice low but venomous. We are on the brink, Samantha. The launch party is non-negotiable. The vendors are demanding deposits. If we cancel, the humiliation will destroy us. We have leveraged everything on this. Leveraged what? I asked. Everything, he said, and for a second the anger cracked, revealing pure terror. The house. The credit cards. It's all maxed out. We need your cash flow to bridge the gap until Jessica's brand takes off. You are going to fix this. You owe us. I looked at him. Really looked at him. For 26 years I had been terrified of this man's disapproval. I had thought he held the keys to my worth, but sitting there demanding money to fund a party for a sister who hadn't spoken to me in a year, he didn't look like a patriarch. He looked like a junkie, looking for a fix, except his drug was validation. He wasn't powerful. He was pathetic. And for the first time in my life I realized that I wasn't the one who was trapped. He was. You want to fix it? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Then let's see exactly what needs fixing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a plain white card. It wasn't a check. It wasn't cash. It was the contact information for a forensic accountant I had retained hours ago. I slid it across the sleek glass table. That is Henry. He specializes in distressed asset recovery. If you are truly broke, if you are truly desperate, then you have nothing to hide. I am not giving you a cent until he audits your entire financial history for the last 10 years. David stared at the card like it was a live grenade. An audit, Samantha, we are your parents, not a corporation. This is insulting. It's business, I countered. You came to my place of business demanding an investment. Investors require due diligence. If you want my help, you open the books, every bank statement, every credit card bill, every loan application. If you have nothing to hide, this should be easy. We can't just expose our private lives to a stranger, he stammered, his face flushing. Trust is the foundation of family. Trust is earned, I said. And right now, your credit score with me is 0. You have 2 choices. You can walk out of here with nothing and face your creditors alone. Or you can call Henry, give him full access, and if he verifies that you are victims of bad luck and not just bad choices, I will consider a structured bailout. But know this, if he finds one lie, one hidden account, $1 spent on something frivolous while you claim poverty, the deal is dead. He looked at me, searching for the scared little girl he used to ignore. She wasn't there. In her place was a woman who spoke the language of leverage. He picked up the card. His hand shook. He knew and I knew that he had no other option. He was drowning and I was the only life raft, but I was making him swim to me. Henry called me 6 hours later. His voice was grim, the kind of professional detachment people use when they have to deliver news about a terminal diagnosis or a catastrophic system failure. "Samantha, I'm looking at the credit reports now," he said. "There is a significant discrepancy." "What kind of discrepancy?" I asked, putting my coffee down. 7 years ago, a line of credit was opened in your name. It was maxed out almost immediately, $50,000. The payments were minimum only, often late, until it was eventually charged off and sold to collections 3 years ago. "Did you authorize this?" My blood ran cold. 7 years ago. I was 19. I was in college, living on vending machine snacks. "No," I whispered. "I didn't authorize anything. The application used your social security number, but the contact email was single quote lisa.style@gmail.com. And the billing address was your parents' house in Scottsdale." I closed my eyes. The memories flooded back. 7 years ago was Jessica's debutante ball. The dresses, the venue, the professional photographer. I remembered my mother crying about how expensive it was, and then suddenly, miraculously, the money appeared. They told me David had landed a big bonus. They lied. They had stolen my identity. They had leveraged my future to pay for a party I wasn't even allowed to attend because tickets were too expensive for the whole family. "It gets worse," Henry continued. 3 years ago, the debt was settled for pennies on the dollar. You paid it off. What? You, or someone pretending to be you. There was a lump sum payment from an account linked to your first big tech bonus. You remember that? I did. I had sent them $10,000 as a thank you gift when I landed my first major contract. I thought they used it for a vacation. Instead, they used my money to clean up the crime they committed against me. They stole from me twice, first my credit, then my success, to hide the evidence. This wasn't just bad parenting. This wasn't just narcissism. This was a felony. This was identity theft, on a scale that could have ruined my entire life before it even started. If I hadn't been so successful so quickly, that charged-off debt would have barred me from renting an apartment, getting a car, or even getting the security clearances I needed for my work. They gambled my entire existence on a party for Jessica. "Do you want me to file a police report?" Henry asked. "This is fraud, Samantha. Clear cut." I stared out the window at the rain. I thought about David in my lobby, wet and pathetic. I thought about Lisa and her obsession with appearances. A police report would destroy them. It would be public. It would be humiliating. It would be justice. But it would also be messy. It would drag me into court, into the mud with them. I didn't want to be in the mud. I wanted to be above it. "No," I said, my voice ice cold. "No police. I have a better idea. Draft a transfer of liability document, and Henry find out who holds the mortgage on their house." "Already have it," he replied. "It's underwater. They're 3 months behind. Foreclosure proceedings start next week." "Perfect," I said. "Excuse me." "Buy the debt. I want to be the bank. I want to own the note. If they are going to live in a house of cards built on my credit, then I want to be the one holding the deed." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Henry chuckled a dry, appreciative sound. "Understood. I'll have the paperwork ready in an hour." I hung up. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger is hot. This was cold. This was absolute. They wanted to use me as a resource. Fine. I would be the ultimate resource. I would be the roof over their heads, the food on their table, and the law in their lives. They had stolen my past. I was going to own their future. I sent the meeting invite for 9 a.m. The next morning, "Urgent family matter," the subject line read. I attached a Zoom link. When the screen flickered to life, they were all there. David and Lisa were squeezed together on their cream-colored designer sofa, looking anxious but hopeful. Jessica was there too, in a separate window, probably from her apartment that I now knew was also being subsidized by my credit. She looked bored, checking her nails, clearly expecting this to be a quick transfer of funds so she could get back to her brand. "Samantha," my mother started, her voice syrupy sweet, "we are so glad you called. We knew you would do the right thing." "I am doing the right thing," I said. "But it's not what you think." I shared my screen. The first document that popped up wasn't a check. It was the credit report Henry had pulled. "Does this look familiar?" I asked. David leaned closer to the camera. "It is a credit application from 7 years ago. In my name. Signed by Lisa Style. It was used to pay for the debutante ball I wasn't allowed to attend." The color drained from my mother's face. Jessica stopped checking her nails. "Samantha, that was A misunderstanding, Lisa stammered. We intended to pay it back immediately. Intention isn't payment, I said. An identity theft isn't a misunderstanding. It's a felony. Silence. The kind of silence that screams. I spoke to my accountant, I continued, and my lawyer. They outlined my options. Option A is I file a police report. You go to jail for fraud. Jessica's brand becomes the daughter of felons. You lose everything publicly and permanently. Jessica gasped. You wouldn't. Option B, I said, ignoring her. I clicked to the next slide. It was a document titled Deed Transfer and Debt Assumption. I bought your debt. All of it. The mortgage you are 3 months behind on, I own the note now. The credit card debt you're drowning in, I bought that too. Effectively, I own you. David looked like he was going to be sick. I do, and as the owner, I have new terms for my tenants. Tenants, my mother shrieked. We are your parents. You are people living in my property who have demonstrated a catastrophic inability to manage their own lives, I said. Here are the terms. You can stay in the house. But the title is in my name. You will receive a monthly allowance from me, enough for groceries, utilities, and basic needs. No more country club dues. No more designer clothes. No more launch parties. If you want luxury, you earn it. I turned my gaze to Jessica's square on the screen. And you. The party is cancelled. The money is gone. You have 30 days to find a job. A real job. If you don't, you are welcome to move back in with mom and dad, but your allowance will be 0. You can't do this, Jessica screamed. You're ruining my life. I am saving your life, I said. I am stopping the bleeding. You have lived in a fantasy world funded by theft for too long. Today you join the real world. I looked at my parents. They were weeping. Not the manipulative tears of before, but the terrified tears of people who realized their reign was over. They weren't angry. They were broken. They had spent their lives worshipping the god of appearances, and now their invisible daughter had just bought the temple. Do you accept the terms, I asked? David looked at Lisa. Lisa looked at the floor. Yes, David whispered. We accept. Good, I said. I'll email the contracts. Sign them by noon, or I file the police report. I ended the call. The screen went black. I sat there in my quiet, rainy apartment, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt sovereign. The contracts were signed by 11 a.m. It was done. I didn't feel a surge of joy, but I felt a deep, abiding peace. I had established a new order. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't the loving family I had dreamed of as a child, but it was honest. I set up the allowance transfers $3,000 a month into a monitored account for David and Lisa. It was enough for a modest life in Scottsdale, but it wouldn't cover country club dues or leased luxury cars. They would have to learn to budget, something they should have done 30 years ago. As for Jessica, she didn't find a job in 30 days. She moved back in with them, and for the first time in her life, she had to live within limits. The influencer dream died quietly, replaced by the reality of a shared checking account and a budget set by her invisible sister. I call this sovereign mercy. It's a concept I came up with on a rainy Tuesday while looking out at the Seattle skyline. Mercy isn't about letting people walk all over you. It isn't about forgiveness without accountability. True mercy is having the power to destroy someone who hurt you and choosing instead to keep them alive, but on your terms. It is the ultimate assertion of sovereignty. By feeding the hand that once bit me, I proved that I was no longer the one being consumed. I didn't walk away from my family. I conquered them. And in doing so, I freed myself. I no longer wait for their approval. I don't need it. I am the architect of my own life, and the foundation is solid because I poured it myself. Tonight I'm sitting on my balcony watching the rain fall over the city I built a life in. I am seen by the people who matter, my colleagues, my friends, and most importantly, myself. The ghost child is gone. In her place is a woman who owns the house, the debt, and the future. If you've ever had to become the parent to your own parents, or if you're building a life they can't take credit for, hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who needs to know that being invisible just means you're building in the dark.